Welcome to this explainer.
Okay, today we are diving into a seriously mind-bending geopolitical thought experiment. We're going to look at a scenario that historians and political scientists love to kick around. What would actually happen if Germany and France just completely dissolved their borders and formed a single European meganation? It's this wild concept often called a modern Carolingian empire, and as we'll see today, it would absolutely rewrite the global balance of power.
I mean, it sounds like the plot of a political thriller, right? What if two countries merged and accidentally broke the entire world order? These two are already the twin economic and political engines of the European Union, but if they took that ultimate step, literally unifying their governments, militaries, and economies, the ripple effect would be massive. We're talking about disrupting everything from local European trade all the way up to global superpower dynamics.
Section 1. A new European superpower, the meganation blueprint. So let's dive right into this. We're talking about taking two immense forces and combining them into a single, unassailable titan right in the heart of Europe.
The sheer scale of this new meganation is honestly awe-inspiring. If you combine Germany's population of about 84 million with France's 68 million, you get a staggering 152 million people. To put that into perspective, that gives this new state the largest population in Europe outside of Russia. And then there's the military force. You take 180,000 active personnel from Germany, add France's 200,000, and suddenly you have a massive force of 380,000 active personnel completely equipped with an integrated blue water navy. It's an instant top-tier global superpower.
And this dominance extends right into their economic footprint, $7.6 trillion. Germany brings a massive $4.5 trillion GDP, which is heavily anchored in industrial depth and high-tech manufacturing, while France brings $3.1 trillion to the table. When you combine them, that $7.6 trillion figure means this unified state would instantly become the third largest economy globally.
But the geopolitical leverage builds even further. See, Germany is an absolute economic heavyweight, but it's a non-nuclear state. France, on the other hand, brings 290 nuclear warheads and a highly coveted UN Security Council veto. By fusing Germany's massive economic engine with France's nuclear status and global diplomatic veto power, you create an absolutely unassailable superpower. You have the ultimate economic leverage fully backed by the ultimate diplomatic and military failsafes. No one could touch them.
Section 2. Internal friction and clashes, the core versus the periphery. Now, while this union looks incredibly potent on paper, we've got to ground this fantasy in reality for a second. The administrative headaches of combining these two distinct cultures and political structures would be immense. The immediate hurdle is just an intense clash of governance. Germany is a highly decentralized federal republic. Their individual states, or Länder, hold massive legislative power. But France? France is an intensely centralized unitary state run very tightly from Paris. These are fundamentally opposing philosophies of how a country should actually be run. You couldn't just pass a few new laws to fix this. You'd have to write up a completely new constitutional framework from scratch.
And then, of course, we have the language barrier. Unlike the US or the UK, this meganation wouldn't have a single unifying tongue. Operating with dual official languages, French and German, means every single piece of the state, from the civil service and the legal system to the entire public education infrastructure, would need to be fully bilingual. This isn't just a fun cultural quirk, it's a massive logistical hurdle that would realistically take an entire generation to smooth out.
Plus, where do you even put the capital? If you choose Paris, the Germans are going to feel sidelined. Choose Berlin, and the French feel alienated. So they would likely have to establish a federal capital in a border city with shared history to prevent localized jealousy. Cities like Strasbourg or Aachen become the prime candidates for this capital compromise, leaving Paris and Berlin to function more as regional cultural and financial hubs.
So, assuming they can somehow figure out all those internal logistics, we have to ask the next logical question. How would the rest of Europe react? I mean, just imagine you're a neighboring country waking up one morning to find this absolute giant suddenly sharing your border.
Section 3. The collapse of the EU. When balance vanishes. This brings us to a really profound irony about this whole scenario. The creation of this Franco-German meganation would likely trigger the immediate collapse of the European Union as we know it.
The entire EU system relies on a very delicate balance among its 27 member states. But if these two nations merge, they suddenly become a single monolithic entity controlling over 40% of the Eurozone's entire economic output. The remaining 60% is just fractured across all the other member states. And this brilliantly illustrates why smaller states like Poland, Italy, and the Netherlands would absolutely panic. They would instantly realize they no longer have any meaningful voice against this massive unified Franco-German voting bloc in Brussels.
Fearing total political domination, the fallout would be swift. We would likely see a northern and eastern breakaway. These nations might just exit the EU entirely to form their own alternative trade and security alliances. So ultimately, Europe would fracture into a two-tiered continent. You'd have a hyper-dense, hyper-wealthy Franco-German core at the center, completely surrounded by a ring of independent, highly skeptical buffer states.
All right, let's zoom out even further now. If the European Union collapses and this mega-nation rises from the ashes, what happens to the global balance of power? How do the other heavyweights, Washington, Moscow, and Beijing, react to this new player stepping onto the international board?
Section 4. A tripolar global order, redrawing the international chessboard. You see, this merger doesn't just redraw the map of Europe. It fundamentally alters global geopolitics. By combining German industrial depth with French military independence and global bases, this new European superpower suddenly finds itself in a position where it no longer strictly needs the United States for its security.
And that brings us to the potential death of NATO. Impartially analyzing the facts here, a state with this much economic might, backed by its own nuclear deterrent and a blue-water navy, would likely push for true European strategic autonomy. They'd have the capability to establish an independent defense architecture which would severely weaken or maybe even end the US-dominated NATO framework altogether.
These global repercussions would force rival powers to adapt immediately. Moscow would suddenly face a heavily fortified, economically resilient, nuclear-armed power right on its western doorstep. Meanwhile, Beijing would find itself sitting across the negotiating table from a unified trading bloc capable of matching its economic leverage point for point. The whole dynamic just completely shifts,
Which leads us to the ultimate strategic outcome of this merger, a tripolar global order. The world would permanently shift away from the current US-China duopoly. Instead, we would see a unified Europe finally asserting itself as a fully sovereign, independent third superpower. It's a complete top-to-bottom reorganization of global influence.
We've seen how this mega-nation would wield unprecedented economic and military might, but obviously at the cost of intense internal struggles and the likely destruction of both the European Union and NATO. So, I'll leave you with this final, provocative thought to ponder. Is achieving true, unassailable European sovereignty actually worth the complete collapse of the very alliances that built it in the first place? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you